Now this figure 15-12, we're getting into correction factor problems and derating and adjustment factor problems that we have to look at. Now notice the load in amps is non-continuous load 95 amps, continuous load 98 amps, and we have 4 current carrying conductors, but we're routing the raceway system with the conductors through an ambient of 122 degrees Fahrenheit. We're routing more than 10% of the run or 10 foot of the run through this higher ambient. So we're going to get into correction factors. 4 more current carrying conductors, we're getting into adjustment factors. So let's take a look now at our method 1, calculating the load. And we call this the 125% rule. 220.10, 215.2A1 little a, 95 amps at 100%, 95. Now notice those loads operate less than 3 hours or with demand factors. The 98 amp load, no, they're saying it's continuous. It operates for 3 hours or more in accordance with the definition of continuous loads from Article 100. And when we do the math, we come up with 122.5. The connected load is 193. But the calculated load is 217.5 that we use to size the conductor. So note 2, we apply 215.2A1A, so that would reference us over to table 310.16, and it would take a 4-aught, good for 230 amps in the 75 degree column, to handle 217.5. Now you remember, 110.14C1 little b says anytime the load is over 100 amps, you're automatically 75 degree terminals. So it'd be a 4-aught in the solution. But now we're not done. We're routing it through this 122 degrees Fahrenheit. We've got to apply that now. We apply the 125% rule in method 1. Now method 2, 95 amps is at 100%, and so is the 98 amps for continuous load at 100%. Adding those up, the connected load and the calculated load is both 193 amps. So now we're going to apply 215.2A1 little b, and we're going to apply table 310.15C1. And we're going to apply table 310.15B1. So in 2, we're applying table 310.15C1. We have 4 current carrying conductors, 80% for 4 through 6. So 4% of 320. Now the 90 degree column we can use, see. But remember, in your studies, the 90 degree column does not exist till you derate and reduce the loading of the conductor's ampacity rating, so to speak. Now, step 3, we're going to apply, again, 215.2A1 little b, along with table 310.15B1, and we're going to pick up 80% from this table, and the grouping that has the listing of 122. So when we take the 82% from that 90 degree column, because we're using the 300 kc mil amperage rating from the 90 degree column, so 82% of 256, we come up with 209.9. So step 2 and 3. Step 2, we're applying the adjustment factors. Step 3, we're applying the correction factors. And the solution is 209.9, but we needed a 300 kc mil from the 90 degree column to do our derating. And notice that 300 kc mil has been reduced from 320 amps to 209.9. So this feeder circuit would take a 300 kc mil, and you got to be able to terminate that. So if those lugs won't take it, remember, you can't saw the strands out because you wouldn't comply with a 300 kc mil from Table 8 to Chapter 9. that requires a minimum of 37 strands of wire that's listed there, or whatever the strands, are in the wire itself. You can't saw it out and give it a haircut, in other words. So you could buy a kit and stab larger lugs under these existing lugs to terminate it, or you'd have to route it a different direction in a different manner to get away from that 122 degrees Fahrenheit, so you wouldn't have to derate so much, or maybe not at all, see. So the note 1 then is telling you, use 215.A1 little a, determining the ampacity of method 1. And 2, you're using 215.2A1B for determining the ampacity of method 2. And you use the larger conductor and ampacity when you're through. So based upon this ampacity here, you're going to use a larger conductor at 300 kc mil. So you definitely want to keep this in mind. Your routing of that conductor is very important. You know, if you went, say, into Home Depot or Walmart and you look up in the ceiling, you'll see that those wiring methods are dropped down about 3 to 3.5 foot. And they're routing those conductors to get away from the heat in the ceiling. And until the code prohibited, electricians used to take and run the conduit down through the valley of the roof, and boy, right up there where the heat was. So what Walmart did, they would run 3/4 inch conduit. They would pull number 10 wire, connect that number 10 wire to a 20 amp breaker, use the 90-degree column for number 10 wire, which would be 40 amps, to derate back to 20. And that worked pretty good, see? And then when they got to the location that they needed to use that wire, then sometimes they just splice with number 12, or maybe take the number 10 all the way to the lighting and different pieces of equipment they wanted to feed that fell within that range, see? So routing of it is very important, and as an electrician, you want to watch running these conductors in areas where the heat can really build up on them, and there's not any time frame where the heat is great and it'll come down and reduce the heat due to the time of day and night and so forth. Or is it air conditioning to cool the raceway systems in the conductors? This is something, a good electrician watches. And that's what this figure 15-12 is illustrating.